it's funny, everybody always asks about Broadchurch. Oh, did you know? Did you know it was going to be this massive hit? You're like, you never know in television. I don't remember Agatha Christie being like this. And I thought, oh, how fabulous could it be to do a show that has all of those things, that's fast and thrilling and funny. Yeah, I mean, but also Matt Smith riding a Triceratops. It's like you just get to do things in this job that you just go, oh, great, nobody else has done that. That's amazing.
So first off, I'd love to speak about the start of your career, particularly your TV career. So my understanding is you wrote, I think, did you write an episode of Crossroads?
And then revived Crossroads for Carlton in 1999, 2000? I can't remember,
And then after that, it was pretty much straight into Born and Bred, the show that you co-created.
Yeah. I think the very first thing I wrote was a monologue about a tube driver on his last day at work called Storm in Norman, and it come out of my fringe theatre work. A producer at Carlton had picked up my work from there, and it was in the days when ITV did regional drama, so they did like London-only drama, 4 half-hour monologues, and we filmed this, and James Bolam agreed to do the part, and it was the story of a tube driver on the Central Line on his last day at work, reminiscing about his life, and filmed it on an actual tube train. And to research it, I went up and down the Central Line with the driver, and brilliant director called Alan Dosser directed it, and that was my first filmed thing, I think. And then Crossroads was around the same time, which was the opposite, from sort of a tiny monologue, just me, and then going into story conferences at this revived soap was delightful. And then Born and Bred came along and got greenlit quite quickly off the back of that, and that was a big surprise.
And what did you learn from that experience? I imagine it must have been like getting straight into it.
I mean, everything. I mean, the biggest thing, I came from fringe theatre, so I've been writing plays, and that had been going nicely. And then what you tend to do is you're like moving into TV, you're doing a lot of different development projects, and you're writing a lot of pilot scripts. So you're writing a lot of episode 1s. And then I remember when we did Born and Bred and it got greenlit off the first episode. And then you're like, oh, episode 2. I've never written an episode 2 of something. I've got to go and find out how these work, and storylining the whole series and working with other writers. So I learned everything off Born and Bred, because you were plunged in the deep end. It was also a big mainstream Sunday night, 8 o'clock, where Call the Midwife is now. And it was a really big hit out the gate, really surprisingly. Really great cast. And then the second season we did 10 episodes. We did 6 in the first, then I think we did 10 in the second and the third. So it was very much learning on the job. I had really great producers on that and great execs, and what it also enabled me to do, they were very open to me being part of the process, and which isn't true of all producers. Not all writers get the access. So eventually I was going and sitting in the edit suites and giving notes on rushes, and just becoming that the thing that you'd be used to doing in theatre, where you're in rehearsals all the time and you're talking with the director all the time. But it was not so common in TV, and this is like 2002 onwards. So it's before showrunners are really much in evidence here. But they were very supportive about that, and so I was on location a lot. I was just very involved, much more involved than I expected to be, and other writers were at that time, quite early on in my career, and I really loved that, because you can make the show so much better. You can really help. You can make the budget work at an instant in a way that other people can't, by going, I actually don't need that character or that motorbike chase sequence or whatever. So, yeah.
And then my understanding is you were at one point developing an idea around the idea of Merlin, which for a UK audience, but then, of course, you show around Camelot.
Yes, they're completely disconnected.
So that was going to be my question: is would your version of Merlin been in any way similar to what we saw with Camelot, or was it?
No, not at all. No, it was with I think it was a BBC. What was then BBC Worldwide is now BBC Studios. It was with the producers of Born and Bred, and BBC Worldwide had come to them going, we would like an international series, and we'd like it to be around this sort of thing, and so they asked me to develop some stuff around that while we were still doing Born and Bred, but. no, there was another, and then there was another Merlin project, which obviously Julie Gardner and all those guys did. So no, utterly, it's just actually a complete coincidence.
And then if we turn to Torchwood,
Yes.
which came then, obviously your first writing for the Whoniverse, wasn't it? I suppose?
That's right. Yes. I sort of tried. Yeah, and I'd done Life on Mars in between, and actually 2 episodes of that, and that was an interesting one because it like coming off Born and Bred, people were like, well, don't write on other shows. You must create your own show next. And then Kudos sent me the pilot script for Life on Mars, and I read it and went, I can't. This is amazing, and this is exactly the show I want to watch. And it was so unlike anything else that I was like, no, I want to do an episode of this, and that was a really incredible experience, and completely just fabulous from start to finish, and doing an episode in each series of that, and then Torchwood, then I think because Julie Gardner was an exec on that, and then was like, oh, I've got this other project I'm doing. I can still remember her email, which just went, "Can we meet for a cup of tea? I have a glint in my eye." And that was the email to come and talk about what she would then go, okay, we're doing a Captain Jack spin-off of Doctor Who.
And how was it writing for a Doctor Who project? Obviously, you've been a fan of Doctor Who for a
Yeah.
long time, but it's an adult tone. Was that strange to sort of wrap your head around when you first started on it, or did you immediately know what it would feel like, what the show would?
I don't think anybody knew what the show would feel like. We had Russell's pilot script, Russell's brilliant episode 1, and there were lots of conversations. But also, what Russell was very keen on is, let's try things. Nobody's done this before. We don't know what it's going to be. So, can it go over here? Can it do that type of an episode? Can it do an emotional episode? Can we bring, some form of Cyberman, Cyberwoman in? Can you do, an episode I wrote called Countryside, which does something else again? And like I think about Kath Tregenna's Out of Time in that first season. It was very much, Toby Whithouse's amazing. The Psychic Pendant. It was very much Russell's approach was try these things. We don't know which will really work. It wasn't a sense of it's only this. It was, well, it could be anything. So let's try all these things. And some of those worked better than others. And then it refined into the second season. And then again, had a kind of amazing evolution with Children of Earth. But it was very clear that you were doing stuff in that show that you couldn't do in Doctor Who. That's for sure.
Is there something, whether an episode or an aspect or something of that show that you're most proud of looking back? Is there something that you look back on most fondly?
Yeah, I think we really began to find it in the second season, and I think for different reasons, I love the second season opener with James Masters as Jack's nemesis. That's got a real brio to it, that episode. And then, personally, the last 3 of that season, which were the last ones I did, particularly Adrift, which is one of my favourite things. Adrift, because it was one of those classic, at the time, it was the same on Doctor Who, where you had a bottle episode where you couldn't use some of the regular cast because you were filming double banked, where you're filming 2 episodes at the same time, so you could only pick and choose people. But that episode where it was much more, it just found an idea that also had an emotional resonance with Adrift, and it was strange and lyrical, and Bob Pugh, who was in that, was amazing. So I loved that, and then I really loved doing the Fragments episode, which is the sort of anthology backstories of all the characters, and just going, this is how they've got to that point. So those, and then the heartbreak of the finale. But yeah, that little run I really love. But Adrift has a special place in my heart, and I think there's probably a bit of a thread that goes from Adrift to Broadchurch in a funny way. It just has a tonal similarity. It's about parenting. It's about all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Well, we're definitely going to come on to Broadchurch for sure.
It was on ITV. Don't know whether you.
So you then ran Law and Order UK.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, bringing in an American, such a sort of, a classic American show everyone sort of knows, and then putting a UK slant on it? Was it tricky to get that to?
It was. I mean, it came to me. It was. I think it was a result of doing Life on Mars, actually, and it came to me via Kudos, who were like, we've done this deal and we want to do this thing. And I just thought, I kind of get how we could do that. And so I really liked the show anyway, but also I thought there wasn't a show around on British TV. It's got an incredible pace. It's very documentary-like in how it's filmed. It's just a really interesting, clever, efficient show where you're talking about issues of the day, that whole ripped from the headlines thing that Dick Wolf talks about. And so we went over to New York. I spoke to Dick Wolf a lot and about what the show was, how they constructed it. He had an amazing... I think the mathematical nature of Law and Order was what was very clear once you started working on it, is that because he said to me at one point, we be careful if you're looking at the first 3 seasons, because there's a scene that's missing from every episode in the first 3 seasons, and it's the scene where the relatives of the deceased come along and look through the morgue window or whatever, and goes, "Oh, that's my son or my cousin or my grandma," and make sure you get them. He said that was when the show started working. He's like that. Wow. Before then, it's like people didn't quite key into it in the same way, but he said they made that tiny adjustment of that scene in every episode, and obviously every episode of Law and Order is self-contained. And then the show started to function. It's interesting, we're sitting here surrounded by clocks.
Yes.
Law and Order, a bit like Agatha Christie, is it is like a Swiss watch, and so that was the delight of doing that, and then going, how do you take that, the intricacy and the Swiss watch nature of it, but make it feel very London-y, make it feel very contemporary, bring our own characters to it. It was a really fun show to do, and what was lovely is, ITV were really fully behind it. It gave them a new type of hit, which I thought was really exciting. I don't think you'd have got that show greenlit without it being... If you'd have gone in and pitched that exact show at that point to ITV, I don't think they would have greenlit it, and yet it became a big audience favourite. So I feel like... And it was just a gorgeous cast when you look at it in terms of Bradley Walsh and Jamie Bamber and Freema Agyeman and Bill Patterson and Harriet Walter and Ben Daniels. It's a really amazing cast. And then I feel like our first guest lawyer was Leslie Manville and Patrick Malahide, and it was like Eddie Marsan came in. It was a regular thing. So you really got the thing for people to come in. So yeah, it was great to do.
So then Broadchurch.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by what it must have been like for you as that show was going out.
Yeah.
Because as a viewer, obviously, you're so hooked into it, and there was such a sort of further around it, so much speculation. What was it like for you watching the reaction? And did you expect that reaction?
No, it's funny. Everybody always asks about Broadchurch. Oh, did you know? Did you know it was going to be this massive hit? You're like, you never know in television. Anything that you make, anything that you write, any creative process or project, you don't know. And what was it like when it went out? It was incredibly both exciting, disorientating, and terrifying. It was all of the things. It was lovely. It was lovely to have a big, once in a decade commercial hit where you were in the newspapers. The coverage of the show, round about episode 3, it moved from the TV pages to the news pages. And you would open the paper, and on page 4 there would be like, here are all the suspects and here are the betting odds, and you were like, what on earth is happening? This is just a made up story. And it really impinged on my life. You literally that thing where people stop you walking down the street, or I would like ring to book a minicab, and they would go, "Oh yeah, sure, Chris, we'll send them along. Just tell us who did it." And every conversation was about that. So it was a little bit terrifying, because you're heading towards an episode 8 where you go, people are either going to like this ending or not like this ending. So there were lots of things. I was also watching Olivia Colman, who obviously was very beloved, but just become a commercial star and a well-known face and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of... It was completely amazing. I loved the whole experience on it, but it's very odd to be at the eye of the storm, because I was the only person who didn't have the experience of watching Broadchurch go out, because I knew everything about it, and it wasn't a surprise to me, and it was a bit weird being at the eye of the storm. Incredible, but you were a bit like that, looking around all the time, going, what's happening and why?
And obviously we're in an era of so many sort of crime dramas, but it still very much stands out, I think. What was the sort of unique idea that did you know you'd happened upon something quite unique with that story, with that concept beyond the genre that it was in?
I don't know if the idea is. I think the big thing for me was, and it was kind of a result of coming out of Law and Order, and that scene I was just talking about. Well, that scene of the relatives, like that's the whole of Broadchurch. Not only do they get a scene, we stay with them, and that's Jodie and Andy Buchan's characters. But I wanted to find an emotional component. It's like, so we always pitched it, always talked about it as an emotional thriller, or as an emotional murder mystery, that it's like, we often in these things, the emotions get a bit subsumed beneath the plotting, and I wanted to say, but how are all these characters really feeling? So that's probably the thing we did differently, and I think visually as well, which we talked about from the start, and I talked about with James Strong, the director who kicked it off for us, and Eros Lynn. But it was very much like a terrible thing happening in a beautiful place, and the dissonance of that, and the landscape being a very important character. So I think landscape, emotion. So I think how we scored it. Genius of Oliver Arnold's. And deservedly winning a BAFTA for that score. We just took nothing for granted in the genre of it, and just thought, what can we do that not for the sake of differentiation, but what's the voice of this piece?
And I know you've always said that it was sort of planned as a trilogy, as the 3 seasons.
Yeah, in my head. I mean, but I never thought we'd get past episode 2, to be honest. So,
Well, so did the success of season 1 change any sort of plans that you had for seasons 2 and 3? Did the shape of that change at all?
No, not at all, actually. And I think there was such an interesting response in the UK. It didn't happen anywhere else, but in the UK to season 2, when people realised it wasn't another dead body under the cliffs, and instead I always pitched it as that it wasn't a place where lots of murders happened, but mainly also I wanted to tell, because there'd been a lot of cases in the world that were sort of similar, and the thing I'd observed from reading a lot about it was that the trial process re-traumatized the victims, and that the sense of truth in the justice system was not the most important thing. And so I wanted to look at that and go, what is that? Can you keep tracking that experience of that family and also of those detectives through a court, the process of having to put the killer on trial? So I think that was a definite that was a definite shock to people, and very controversial at the time, it didn't change. I was like, that's the story. And the conversation I had with ITV was very much, I don't think there's not another dead body who's going to turn up, and it's not going to be that show. If we want to keep telling this story, then that's the next chapter of the story. And I knew then that also the 3rd season would be about sexual assault, because that was, there's a lot of that, and we work very closely with the Dorset Sexual Assault Referral Centre, and that was the shape of it in my mind, so that it didn't just become lots of bodies on the beach.
And so I imagine from that you didn't ever consider continuing beyond the 3rd season, or did you?
No. I mean, sometimes you think, occasionally over the years you go, is there another story there, or is there? But I think you also have to accept when you've caught that lightning in a bottle, and I think we really did with Broadchurch, especially now when you look back at the cast for any of those seasons, and the incredible people we had in it. It's like you're never going to replicate that. So it's such a privilege and an honour when you when a show lands, particularly in that way. But even, I still feel that about Born and Bred. It just landed, and it was a Sunday night fixture for 4 series. And it's you have to be careful not to then try and overjuice it, or think that how the audience receives it, or what they want next, or all that kind of stuff. You're always, serving at the grace of the audience, and that changes. And so to just do the thing you've done isn't a guarantee of future success. You've got to. So sometimes it's just like, it was brilliant that we did that, and we don't need to try and replicate it. 5 years down the line.
So then Doctor Who.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd already written a number of episodes before you came back
Yes.
as showrunner.
Yes.
Was there anything particular, anything specific that you learned writing those episodes and watching the other showrunners' work that you took into your era?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's such a long answer. I think you learn. Oh, what do you learn writing? The thing is, every episode is different. Maybe that's the thing you learn. Every episode is different. So you can learn how to write one particular episode. It's not going to teach you how to write another type of episode. You know, writing 42 for David Tennant's Doctor is not going to teach you how to write even Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, which is set on a spaceship, like 42 is.
Yeah.
But it's not going to teach you how to write Power of Three or I don't know, anything else, any other episode. So, no, I knew that you had to have a plan coming in. I knew that it was relentless. It was more about the practical workload, you know, and the conversations I had with Stephen and the way I'd observed Russell, because I was around on Torchwood a lot while he was showrunning Doctor Who at the same time. Madness. It's about organising your life, it's about the team you put around you, and having a plan of what you want to do, and then seeing that through. Really, no, it's the incredible thing about writing Doctor Who is every episode will teach you something new about how to write that episode once you've finished writing that episode. So it's kind of, the knowledge is slightly useless, but that's what also makes it such an incredible show to run and to write, and it's just the joy in it, you know.
And I know that you said you always knew you were going to cast a female Doctor when you came in the show. Was there anything else about your era that you sort of knew up top? You were like, this is something I definitely want to go for in my...
Yeah, I think definitely bringing back the historicals in a slightly different way, and thinking there was a raft of historical stories that the show could tell, not necessarily with a female Doctor, but with the characters of Yaz and Ryan, and bringing them in terms of their personal histories, their heritage, what stories the show could have access to in terms of Rosa Parks, in terms of Partition, in terms of those sorts of things that the show hadn't told before. So there was a certain element of, there's still a lot of untold stories in this show, and maybe historicals with the historical figures who changed or were part of a big historical moment, which is slightly more... The historicals became more like they were in the beginning of the show, in Hartnell's era, in the early 60s, of like big events, big moments. So that was part of it, and then stuff that was going to resonate with the audience in terms of experiences. So like setting one in an Amazon-style warehouse was one of the first ones I knew I wanted to do, because you're like, okay, that's a great way to have a creepy robot story, is to do that. And so you were looking for the resonances with present day things while also being cheeky and having fun with it.
And so since you've left the show, Russell's era has obviously made a number of sort of callbacks to your era, and we also saw Jodie return not so long ago. What was it like? What's it been like, sort of seeing that from now that you're outside of the show?
Oh yeah, lovely. Well, lovely. Yeah, I remember. I think there was a line I put in Jodie's era about something from Stephen's era. Maybe it was about the Sonic not doing wood. But I remember him messaging, going, "Oh, I've contributed something to Doctor Who. I exist." And I think everybody feels like that. It's like the bits, you don't realise you've contributed to it while you're doing it, because you're just doing the job and it's within your control. But then if you get a callback, or if somebody mentions Carvanista or Flux, or let alone Jodie popping up, it's really like, oh, that was a thing. It's quite unusual. There isn't an equivalent experience anywhere else. So it's lovely and surprising, where you think, oh, that's because you're doing that from previous series. You're building on, sort of laying a fire almost. You're putting your sticks on top of the sticks that are already there, and you're very conscious of doing that. I'm very conscious of I'm making a reference back to The Deadly Assassin or The Brain and Morbius or something like that. And then, but when somebody does it to you, it's like, oh, that's a real surprise. Surprise and a delight.
And would you ever go back? Do you think? Would you ever go back and write another?
No, I mean, I don't feel like I have any unfinished business, and I'm not that bothered about going back. I haven't really done it on anything. I like going back. There's so many new things to do and so many opportunities. I'm interested in things I haven't done and trying out things. That's why I wrote a novel this year. So it's like I thought I want to try that, and I've had such a good run on Doctor Who and done so many different things. It also feels, it's somebody else's turn. You have to. That's a very precious seat in which you're sitting, and you want to go, oh yeah, who's the next person? What are they going to do? What are they going to do that's new? So no, I don't ever think about that.
Well, mentioning the next person and seeing what's coming up, I just wanted to quickly get your reaction to the ending of the most recent episode of Doctor Who, the Billy Piper appearance. Do you have any clue where you think that that might be going?
No, I didn't have any clue when I was watching it. I didn't. The only thing I knew was that Jodie was in that episode. Because I was also when I finished, I was very, very clear to Russell that I didn't want to know anything. Right. So I really actually didn't want to know that Jodie was going to regenerate into David. But they were like, you have to know this because you're an exec on this episode. No, I didn't know, and I love not knowing. I love being back as a viewer again. That's really cool. And no, never ask. I never ask, and I never want to know. I want to watch it because that's the thing. That's what takes you back to. That's where you start. As a 5-year-old or whatever, you're there watching Doctor Who, and to be back in that position, having had your own TARDIS in inverted commas. I didn't have a real TARDIS, but it's lovely to then go back and go, oh, what's happening now?
And now, if we come to your new show, Seven Dials, how did this come together? How did this sort of project first come together from your perspective?
I was approached by Netflix, and Suzanne Mackey, who's a producer of the Crown and runs Orchid Pictures, and asking, oh, does Chris have any interest or fondness for Agatha Christie? And I immediately went, yes, having read Agatha Christie as a kid, so I don't know, from when I was like 12, I would go to the library every week and pick out an Agatha Christie. I was trying to figure out earlier when that first happened. I wonder if I feel like maybe I was on holiday and there was an Agatha Christie in a B&B or by the seaside or something. It's just one of those, picked it up and read one, and I think once you read one, you're sort of hooked for life. So I read loads of them as a teenager. She was a real gateway drug for me into reading. Probably her and Terence Dicks are the two gateway drug dealers, I guess you would call them. So then, and obviously you can see the bones of Christie in Broadchurch, and it's really clear. So when that came up, I was really interested, and we had a conversation. We talked about what it might be. I went away and read a load of stuff, and then on reading Seven Dials, which I didn't really remember having read the first time around. I don't know whether I did. I really thought, oh, hang on, this is everything I love about Agatha Christie, but it's quite different as well, in that, first of all, the character of Bundle, 19, 20-year-old woman who is underestimated despite her aristocratic status, is an incredible character and very different from the received sense of there's Poirot, there's Marple. I love both of them, but Bundle is very, very different. And it means the piece has a different energy. The novel has a different energy. So that was number one. Number two was it's really funny. The book is really funny, and it's got that sort of P.G. Wodehouse, bright young things, cast of characters, very young. All of the characters in it very young. And it also, it's a cinematic thriller. It's not a stage-bound murder mystery all happening in a drawing room. It's not that at all. She was writing in the late 20s thrillers that basically set the template for Hollywood blockbusters 50, 60, 70 years later. They're really propulsive. They move from place to place. So it was all of that, and I thought I don't remember Agatha Christie being like this. And I thought, oh, how fabulous could it be to do a show that has all of those things, that's fast and thrilling and funny and with an incredible central character that you haven't really seen before, and then you could open that to a new generation. We could do it really cinematically. We talked about references like North by Northwest and sort of that Hitchcock cinematic vibe being appropriate as well. So if we could do that, then it just would reinvigorate what people expect when they come to an Agatha Christie, because she was writing for 50 plus years. There's such a range of stuff that she's done, and for someone who is the best-selling author of all time in the world and has sold billions of books, she's sort of underrated as well. And so that was the delight, really. And also the basic thing of to repay the love you had for something in an early part of your life is a really gorgeous thing to be able to do, and in order then to show other people and go, look at this, isn't it exciting?
And how do you approach adapting Christie? Because I imagine, as you say, there's so much sort of reverence, a lot of which is probably quite healthy, but I imagine you also have to shake that off a little bit to put your own stamp on the material somewhat when you're creating a series like this.
Yeah, I think I'd never done an adaptation before. The sort of things I'd done was like Law and Order or taking over an existing series, and which is next door to adaptation, but not really that. The thing I started with was, what do I love about the novel? What is the essence of it? And when I put the novel down, what do I think? What do I feel about it? And then you're really distilling everything down into that, and trying to find analogous moments in a screenplay. So the plot is pretty much the same as the book. There's extra things that we've got in there as well, and it's very grounded in psychological and emotional truth, but it's also deliberately funny because that was the experience I took away from the book. But the other great thing about working with James Pritchard, who is Agatha's great grandson, and the Christie estate and that whole company, who are obviously a big part of this, is they are very keen for things to live for now and for viewers now. So they don't expect reverence, and I think there's a difference between reverence and faithfulness to the spirit, and you want to make sure it lives as an exciting show on Netflix for somebody who's never heard of Agatha Christie, and also a really fulfilling experience for a really hardcore Agatha Christie fan. So you're trying to balance all of those things, but mainly you're just going, great character, great story, great set pieces, and if we can get a great cast, which we really managed to do thanks to Robert Stern, genius casting director, you're really at the races then.
Well, with the cast, obviously, an incredible array of talent here.
Yeah.
Do you ever, either on this or anything else where you've created a character new, do you ever write with actors in mind, or do you always leave that to further down the road?
It's usually left further down the road. It might be when you're writing, someone comes into your mind as you're writing a script, and that can happen. But normally I don't. But the big exception was Olivia and Broadchurch. Is that it was sort of the first name, because I storyline things on a whiteboard, and the first name that went Ellie, sort of like Olivia Colman, and then cut to and I'd mentioned that. Then you write a script, you go through development, and then it. I was just talking about it with Jane Featherstone, the producer and the exec producer, and she was like, "Well, why don't we ask her? There's nothing to lose." And then she ended up doing it and winning many awards and being amazing in it. So that's the exception which proves the rule, I think.
And in terms of this, obviously we've got these 3 episodes. I've seen the first one and very much hooked.
What's your theory?
Yeah.
End of episode 1. I think you're not necessarily going to have.
No, I'm going in blind. I'm going to enjoy the ride and see where it takes me. So, but could you see yourself adapting more, Christie? I know there's the Secret Chimney.
Yeah, I mean, the Secret of Chimneys is a little more. It's comes before Seven Dials, and the character of Bundle's quite different actually in the book. So I don't think there's a natural prequel or all that kind of stuff. No, I mean at the moment, to be honest, because we're only just finishing making it, you're just like, I'm just really excited to put this out into the world and see what happens and how people receive it. Because I think what we talked about right at the start was, can we make this a delicious treat? And it's the big word of like, it's a treat. It's a treat when it lands on the 15th of January. And it's like, we really used that as our North Star when we were making it. And, you know, lots of conversations I had with Chris Sweeney, our brilliant director, of like, how is that going to feel like this is a Christie for Netflix rather than the US movies or the BBC adaptations, which are all amazing, but like, what's our specific thing? And I think that sense of a really enjoyable treat with the absolute best of British actors is the big thing. So it's at the moment we're just like, okay, we're going to put this out into the world now, and who knows what's going to happen.
And looking back over all these projects that we've spoken about, you know, any others, have you got this? I imagine this will be difficult, but have you got a favourite or a couple of favourite scenes that you've ever written?
Oh, blimey. I don't normally go back and rewatch stuff once it's gone out.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I have favourite scenes. Well, there's a couple in Broadchurch that instantly come to mind. I would have to think in about 3 weeks I'll have an answer for that, and I go, oh, that's the answer for the question. But there's a scene in an early episode of Broadchurch, possibly episode 2 or 3, where they're Ellie and Hardy, so David and Olivia's characters, are late night at the police station. Everybody else has gone home. They're looking at something, and he's driving her mad, and she invites him to dinner, and it becomes really tetchy. And that scene, the reason I feel fondly about that scene is when the rushes for that scene came in the following day. It was quite early on in the filming, and we just thought, oh my goodness, these two together. They are so brilliant, and they are so funny and so serious. And it was, I feel very fondly about that scene, because it was like, oh, I want to see more of them bickering and and working stuff out together. So that felt it. And then the other scene, probably there's a scene between Beth and Mark, Jodie and Andy Buchan's characters in the final episode of Series 3, probably the top of Act 4 of Episode 3, if I'm right. Where they decide they're going to part, and it's really quite a long two-hander. And I remember thinking once we got that locked in the edit, I thought, I'm really proud of that scene. They're amazing in that scene, but I'm really proud of it. But yeah, I mean, but also Matt Smith riding a Triceratops. It's like you just get to do things in this job that you just go, oh great, nobody else has done that. That's amazing.
And then just very briefly as we come to a close, I also just quickly wanted to ask about Death of the White Hart, the adaptation of your novel. What's that like, adapting your own work? Is that
it's interesting. You've got different hats really. So it's you have to find the voice for the adaptation that is slightly different from the book. So we're working with a great team on that. So it's just quite early days in adapting that. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice because I know the world and all that kind of stuff, and then you're just doing a different job. It's very useful having done the Seven Dials adaptation first. So yeah, we'll see.